scene in New York City earlier this week. Protesters with signs reading, "Paul Weiss, Cowards of the Year," and "Paul Weiss, Profiles in Cowardice." Paul Weiss, what will you tell your children? Paul Weiss is not a man. Paul, Weiss is a law firm. And 2 weeks ago, after President Trump issued an executive order terminating federal contracts with Paul Weiss and suspending security clearances for the firm's lawyers, Paul Weiss caved. The firm went to the White House and signed some sort of deal with Trump, or made some sort of deal with Trump that includes them giving tens of millions of dollars in free legal work to causes that Trump supports. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Trump has been picking on law firms one by one, threatening them, trying to scare the legal profession into not challenging him in court and not representing people he's targeting. And even as rich highbrow firms like Paul Weiss and now Skadden Arps have gone to Trump and offered him tens of millions of dollars in free legal services for his chosen causes to try to save themselves while he attacks the legal profession and the independence of the judicial system. These two firms, I believe, ruining their reputations and likely ending their businesses in the process of doing this. Turns out the rest of the legal profession is wiser. The rest of the legal profession is realizing it's time to fight. The first firm to fight back was Perkins Coie. Now today, two more. And at least thus far, they're winning. Today, Jenner and Block and Wilmer Hale both sued Trump after he signed executive orders that also targeted them. Tonight, in two separate courtrooms, two separate judges sided with the firms and blocked Trump's actions against them, at least for now. I mean, what Trump is doing here is not just going after individual law firms like they were random businesses, right? He's attacking the whole legal profession. He's attacking the ability for any one of us, any entity, to have legal representation against the government without that legal representation fearing retribution themselves. Trump is attacking the rule of law by attacking the machinery of the law. So much depends on how the lawyers at the center of this attack choose to respond. And experts who see this sort of autocratic breakthrough and the effort to try to change fundamentally the legal system in this way say that the timing on the fight back really matters. It's basically now or never. This is from Scott Cummings, professor of legal ethics at UCLA Law School. He's studied the decline of legal systems in autocracies. Professor Cummings says this, quote, "In the US, the window for action is closing. And when it does, there will no longer be opportunities for meaningful action against the lawyers in charge of this radical democratic takedown. Once this happens, as it has in other autocracies, the bar will be captured by the regime and levers of influence will be eradicated. The clear lesson from these regimes is that a wait-and-see approach does not work, and attempts at appeasement end up facilitating autocratic consolidation. Ultimately, democracies die when people lose hope that change is possible. We must not succumb to this pessimism." Joining us now is Scott Cummings, professor of legal ethics at UCLA's Law School. Professor, it's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So you wrote this week that what Trump is doing is something that follows an autocratic legal playbook that's been used over and over again and in country after country around the world. Can you help us understand what that playbook entails and what are the steps?
Sure. This idea of an autocratic legal playbook says, basically, if you're a leader who wants to consolidate absolute power, the most effective way to do that is not through force, but through law, by finding and exploiting legal loopholes in the constitutional system, and then using those loopholes to essentially knock down and demolish all of the independent democratic institutions that are designed to limit executive power. So, the classic strategy is to capture the courts, right? Knock out the independent arbiter of law that's supposed to keep the president within legal guardrails. To do things like capture the public bureaucracy, right? Take over government legal offices that are designed to be independent from the president and to keep the president within constitutional guardrails. And now we're seeing the other big move that is under the autocratic legal playbook, which is to take down the legal profession altogether, right? To start at the top with these apex law firms and to disable them from representing individuals in court with interest against the government, and thereby really destroy the adversary system, because the adversary system is premised on everyone being able to select their own lawyer and have their day in court.
In diagnosing what Trump is doing along those lines and recognizing the way that same playbook has been used in other countries and at other times, you essentially say that diagnosis, our ability to see the way it has worked in other places, should help us in terms of coming up with a response or a defense to it. You say that American lawyers and law firms should learn the autocratic legal playbook in reverse, basically to be able to anticipate it, to be able to proactively fight against it. In practical terms, what would that look like?
Well, I think in practical terms right now, they're way out ahead, right? I mean, they've run far out ahead of the opposition. I think people are starting to catch up to the idea that this is actually systematic, it's coordinated, it's targeted, it's well thought out, and we need to do the same to protect democracy and to prevent the playbook from being successful in this particular case. I think that what learning the playbook in reverse looks like now is to really think ahead, right? To put yourself in the mindset of an authoritarian leader like Trump, and to think ahead at what steps they want to take and where they want to go. And I think if you look at autocracies that have consolidated around the world, and people talk a lot about Hungary because a lot of the Trump lawyer team has studied Hungary quite intensively. If you look at what happens in the future, right, a few steps ahead, in every single one of these countries, the important point to remember is that in none of them do leaders do all the things that Trump is doing, take aim at all of these independent institutions, and then just walk away and call a new election, right? They're doing this to stay in power permanently. And so in practical terms, what we need to be doing now is to think about what it would look like for Trump to try to stay in power permanently and to start to protect the democratic institutions that will prevent that from happening.
Scott Cummings, professor of legal ethics at the UCLA School of Law. That is a very sobering analysis, and one that I 100% agree with, and I am glad that you have been able to articulate it in the way you have, sir. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'll be right back.